Okay, so people, so this is chapter 12. I'm going to lecture about the first two that are in the packet. And then the last two, I don't see even showing you any PowerPoints on it. But you guys need to do your reader. When's your reader due? Next Wednesday. Okay, and so it's just that the other two I'm making you do, you do need to understand a little bit about each of the three eras. You need to definitely know which era we're in, which is what? Cenozoic. It's the last one. Think of the word recent. I'm distracted by a lot of you are not focusing. Think of the word recent, and R-E and then C-E-N-T, or the C-E-N, like Cenozoic, recent. Okay? That's the one that we're in. So you need to remember which one we're in. Let's see, what else? And then I wanted to mention the different theories and ideas before we watched Birth of the Earth. That's why I wanted you to fill in that other one. Because it's pretty interesting how scientists think that life was able to start on Earth. Okay? And the movie will do a spectacular job showing this to you also. Okay, so for this section, first you guys need to know that for fossils to form, all the right things need to just happen perfectly. So fossils are extremely rare. Even though we have found many fossils. You have to realize, though, we're talking over billions of years, really, for our oldest fossils. But more where the life, is going crazy with animals, it's millions, hundreds of millions, though, right? So it might seem like we have lots of fossils, but over time, very few have been made. So this guy is a famous guy. I think he was preserved in a bog. A bog forms tar. Tar comes from decomposed plants versus oil coming from decomposed animals. Okay? Okay, so there, So, I don't know if they play it anymore. When I was a kid, you know School of Rock? The commercials and stuff? So there used to be a great one on where gas and energy, where it came from, all the oils, and they showed the dinosaurs, right? And that's reality. So the dinosaurs, their bodies were buried. The carbon elements broke down basically into oils, and that's our gases. Well, the same thing could happen where there's lots and lots of plants, so like swamps, large forests. When all those plant life decay, those carbon molecules also form tar, okay? Which also tar can be burned too. You guys see when they do roofing, you see the tar that's hot and black, and that's flammable. Okay, so the four types of fossils. One is per mineralization. This one's kind of cool. So the remains were left behind, and minerals were attracted and settled and attached to the organism's remains, covering it basically and protecting it in kind of like a rock, out of a rock, basically, mineral rock, like iron and different things that could be in the water. And so it got, think of like ironized. I mean, it's not just iron, but it was protected then by a metal or a mineral layer. And notice all these have to do with water. This one I just think is beautiful. So then some of them, though, will form casts. So wherever the organism was buried, when it decomposed and deteriorated, it left an empty space, like a mold. And once again, the minerals flow in there, and they make a cast. And then we could pour plaster Paris into these depressions, and so they're like, they're like an imprint of the actual fossil of what it looked like. So like a mold. Okay, question? So the fern, yeah, I think so. So up on my desk, I'll tell you guys about this in a minute. I have a fern fossil. There's a couple little plant leaves in there that you can see, and it's 240, might be 90, I have to look closer, million years old. So this rock right here, this sedimentary rock, has a cool little fossil in it. This wasn't that expensive. I think I probably paid like $12 for it. And it came from Virginia City, if you guys ever noticed that cool rock shop. Used to be more up there. Hoping Virginia City gets a little bit rebuilt. A lot of stores closed down in our recession up there. And they're seasonal also, right? So we have some good rock shops up there. Okay, so that's the impression type. Then there's trace fossils, so leaving traces behind, leaving evidence behind. So nests, prints, burrows, things like that. So we're getting this down. So you can see these prints, yeah. I'm not sure. They're types of footprints, and it has to do, those might be from nails. I'm not sure. You have to look in your book, and I bet it tells you. Yeah, well, you'd have, look it up. Look it up. Okay, so moving on, one more type is when we actually get preserved remains. And from preserved remains, we could collect DNA. The mitochondrial DNA is the toughest DNA, and so many times that's preserved in bones. But on this guy, this is the Iceman, there's actual tissue there that we can get skin tissue from, muscle tissue from. It's obviously dehydrated. And this is even rarer that we can get, actual remains. So where we can find these, there would be an ice, volcanic ash, and bogs, and I'll show you one more in a second. Bogs are the old swampy areas. Can I go? So bogs, where else do you think we could get full remains? You guys know of a famous movie, it's actually a famous book where they talked about this. Go ahead, Jeff. Wait, hold on. Okay, so I don't think we have a spot for this, do we? But we need it. So just get it over on the margins. You maybe just put sedimentary rock and give it a star. And then there's only a tiny percentage of living things have ever been fossilized. Like I said, they're extremely rare, and the only way to make them is through sedimentary rock. At least the real fossils, the preserved remains, that's different. You need even more of a special situation for preserved remains. But you have to have water involved and layering. And sedimentary rock is our softest rock, right? You can some of it you can break, you kind of pound, and it comes off in layers. And that's where we find our fossils. So relative dating, look at the word relative. It's relative. It depends on where it's placed or what it's around. I can tell you guys to line up by height. I could say, go ahead, line up by height, right here along the side of the classroom here. I don't know how tall you each are, but relatively I can figure out, that Chris is taller, I think, than Blaza. Right? If I lined you guys up. So I just know who's taller or shorter relative to each other. Are you guys following me on this? Okay, so I could put it in order this way. I might not know the exact, don't know the exact years, like I don't know exactly how tall you guys are in inches. But I do know that this one's taller than that one. or this one's shorter than this one. The same thing works with these layers. So these bottom, look at this red, this orange right here. You know that whatever fossils are found in that layer lived before the fossils that are found in that yellowish white layer. Do you guys agree with that? Because this was buried first, right? Sometimes when we look at these questions on the multiple choice proficiency test questions, we get backwards. So read the questions carefully. And are they asking you, you know, what's the most recent? Are they asking you what the oldest is? Are they making you compare? Read carefully. So that's called relative dating. Now, the one that's more like a clock, like if I got the meter stick out and measured how tall you guys really are, a form of measurement in units, then we go to what's called absolute dating, or in your book they're calling it radiometric dating, because it has to do with radioactive elements being our clocks. So what does it say on the box there? Radiometric dating. So get down the bold, and then I want you guys to move to follow the directions. It wants you to shade in the neutrons, comparing carbon-12 to carbon-14, and fill in the numbers there from the board. So the increments, not in seconds or minutes, the increments in the unit we call half-lives. Okay, you guys should be copying. So a half-life is the amount of time it takes for half of the isotope to decay. For half of the isotope, or that radioactive element, to turn into what it decays into. Then we can measure it. Now carbon-14 actually decays into nitrogen-14. And you can see by the graph, it does it like a ticking clock. So we find the Iceman. We measure in it, we take a chunk of his bone. We measure in that bone material how much carbon-14 is in the bone compared to how much nitrogen-14 is in the bone. Then we can figure out if it's half, if you got to figure out the ratio. So 50% of the sample, 50% was carbon-14 compared to nitrogen-14. Then one half-life has occurred because half of the carbon-14 became nitrogen-14. The carbon-14 is just around us. And again, it's radioactive, where when we are eating carbon, some of it's going to be carbon-14. And it just stays in our bones, basically. We don't exhale carbon-14 out. We exhale carbon-12 out in the form of carbon dioxide. So it accumulates in our body, and then when we die, it stops. We're not going to accumulate anymore. And it's going to just decay then. And we can measure it and use it like a clock. Now on your test, you guys are going to have different possible graphs that you have to be able to use. Now notice, one half-life right here takes how long? Good, 5,730 years. So however much carbon-14 was in the organism bones, half of it will be nitrogen, 14, and 5,730 years. We'll lose another half of what we had, double that. And we can age the bones. This is for aging living things, things that have accumulated carbon. We can age trees this way. But there's other radioactive elements that have way bigger half-lives. They're way bigger molecules, like uranium and plutonium. And they get accumulated in rocks. So now we can date rocks. Or if it's a really old fossil that doesn't have any, carbon left in it, the clock stopped ticking, then we could date a rock that's laying next to it and get kind of a close age of that layer. All right, so you made it through that one. Okay, so geological time divides Earth's history based on events. You notice those times, like with Paleozoic and all that, They weren't even increments. We use events to separate them. Actually, go ahead, skip index fossil. I will give you guys extra credit if you do it on your own. Okay? So go ahead and skip index fossil. So you can get that on your own for extra credit. Okay, we need this one. So where are we putting that? Geological time scale. So we're going to skip that whole index fossil box. Once again, do it for extra credit. So the history of Earth is represented in this geological time scale. And here we have a little graph. We only went back on that last page of this packet to basically this 550 mark. Do you see that? Do you see the three eras? Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic. Back here is what we call the Precambrian. And this is where our oldest life started, which is cyanobacteria. Okay, so a little bit here when I talk about eras. They last tens to hundreds of millions of years. You guys see this? This is eras. Over to the left. The era box on the left. Wait, hold on. The era box on the left. It's just the definition. Lasts tens to hundreds of millions of years. Again, I wouldn't write that out. I would write 10 dash hundreds M Y. Now, the eras that are going to the right, do you guys see this? You're going to write Cenozoic, Mesozoic, and Paleozoic in the three boxes. They're numbered for you. Now, for who, the description. Notice that the Cenozoic is broken into two periods. I'm not going to make you memorize that, but just notice this. But I want you to get some examples down. So we have mammals, flowering plants. You add a couple, just put 2 or 3 things down for a description. So it's Mesozoic. It ranges from 248 million years ago, and you have this on the other side, right? You have this on 12.5, so you don't have to write the years down. But do notice this one's broken up again into periods. There's 3 of them. You're probably a little more familiar with them because we dig the dinosaurs. And lots of times they make different mistakes with this in Hollywood, on TV shows and movies and cartoons. So all you need to put there for the description is, dinosaurs. Lots of times it's known as the age of the reptiles because we really thought dinosaurs were closely related to reptiles. We now know that a lot of the dinosaurs were more closely related to birds, but some of the dinosaurs are still more closely related to reptiles. Okay, then the old one is Paleo, meaning old. So here's the oldest area out of just these 3 that we study more. And notice, it's such a longer time period, 250 approximately, right? Million years. So we have lots of periods to break up. We have lots of events that have changed. I do want you to write that it started, follow me on this, it started with the Cambrian period. And the Cambrian period is well known for the Cambrian explosion. I think I mentioned that the other class, where all modern day plants came from. So this is actually only 39 million years is the Cambrian period. Short time, but made a lot of diversity because it followed that biggest mass extinction. Okay, but this is where we get, like I said, the earliest plants and the animals. I think we're okay. This just goes more in depth. Okay, so stop there. Nope, we're stopping.